Today, we welcome you to our dialogue, which is sponsored by the IUCN Commission on Education and Communication, as well as the World Commission on Protected Areas. And our focus today is on nature sounds and its role in helping us conserve our natural world. Next slide, please. One of the initiatives that was launched during the early parts of the COVID pandemic was called Sounds of Your Park. And if some of us recall, during the pandemic, many of us were asked to stay at home, social distance from our friends and others. And there was a huge desire from many for reconnecting with their parks, whether it's an urban park, national park, or regional park. And they were unable to access these special places. So that's where Sounds of Your Park really emerged under the leadership of Parks Canada, US National Park Service, as well as Colorado State University and the George Wright Society. We launched this initiative to bring the sounds of your park, whether they be natural sounds, sounds of our cultural activities, to your home. And for those of us who were stuck in our basements. So this is another way for us to help connect all of us to nature during a very difficult time. Next slide, please, Jose. So the various conservation tools that are out there, focusing on the conservation of our ecosystems, looking at the human impacts as well as wildlife behavior, they all have a connection to the sounds. And today we're going to hear from some of our guests on how their sounds, their use of natural sounds will help impact some of these, our influences on ecosystems, wildlife behavior, as well as human impact. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide, Jose? Oh, thank you. So while the use of natural sounds is very important for us to study our ecosystems, animal behaviors, as well as investigating human impacts, there are some huge benefits to us as well. Recent research has demonstrated that huge benefits of natural sounds for our health, whether it's in pain reduction, enhanced moods, stress relief, increasing our cognitive performance, as well as helping us heal and recover in a quicker manner. And in fact, a recent review in the Washington Post last week highlighted the importance of bird sounds for mental health and the highlighting the research behind those particular studies. Next slide, please. So going back to connecting back to the nature for all principle, I think this quote from Sir David Attenborough is so appropriate and highlights the importance of connecting people to nature in all different circumstances around the world. No one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. And sound, natural sounds is one way that we can, in fact, connect with uh, our fellow human beings from around the world. So I'm going to stop there. But before I go on to introduce our three guests, it would be great if everyone can go on the chat and identify what sounds they have experienced and which have inspired them to help conserve the natural world. So I'll just stop there. So while we're filling out the chat box with your favorite sounds, I would like to introduce our first speaker. It's my great pleasure to introduce Deanne Maria Restrepo, a musician, a sound artist, as well as a performer. Deanne is a co-founder and active member of the multidisciplinary collective named VozTerra, which in co-production with the Museum for the United Nations, UN Live Museum, seeks to be an agent of change in reaction to the climate crisis and the protection of biodiversity through sound. She's also working as a workshop leader in laboratories that propose listening and connecting with Mother Earth as healing tools. The experience of deep listening to nature, such as soundscapes, and the workshops accompanying the Truth Commission with ex-combatants and people victimized by the war in Colombia have allowed her to combine her aesthetic perception of beauty with a growing awareness of our deep connection with Earth. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Deanne. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. It depends where you are. I am very pleased to be here in this conversation about sounds of nature. Like Mike just told you, I am a composer and I am here representing the VozTerra team. I will do my best with my English. Please don't hesitate. If you don't understand me, please ask me. So let's see what happened. So just, can we start the presentation, please? We have just heard the voice of Guacharaca in Caquetá, in English, Spicule chachalaca, and scientific name Hortalis gutata. I am a member of VozTerra, a multidisciplinary collective that was born in 2019 with the support of the Museum for the United Nations UN Live. We aim to preserve and protect ecosystem by amplifying their unique voices through collaboration with artists and content creators, and to raise awareness about their critical importance and inspire action to protect them for future generations. Next, please, just. VozTerra was only in its 4th month when the pandemic hit. As a collective that worked with listening and recording ecosystem, we immediately wondered what to do at a time when the whole planet seemed to be listening. Finally, we humans being able to remember that we are not alone on Earth and that there is life around us clamoring to be listening. We launched the campaign Sounds from Your Window in collaboration with the museum. 56 artists from 12 countries participate, 150 windows recordings received from over 10 countries, and 4 albums were hosted on a digital platform under the name VozTerra. Next, please. This Polish American composer, poet, and performer proposed that to really listen, we must destroy our indifference. She reminds us that the poetic perspective is needed for that moment when we seem to be listening for the first time. For me, artist creation has to do with the poetic approach, and in that sense, I can say that what interests me as an artist is to raise awareness intellectually and emotionally through sound. Listening for me is a tool that allows us to build a vision of the territory in interrelation and interdependence with all forms of life. I cannot talk about listening without also talking about spirituality. For me, listening is about connecting with a spiritual dimension and an understanding that we are not separate from nature. Next, please. When the master Thich Nhat Hanh was asked about what we need to do to save our world, he answered, "What we most need to do is to hear within us the sound of the earth crying, to feel the pain of the air, to listen to the voices of the more than human, help us transcend our anthropocentric view and connect with being part of an ecosystem called Earth, for which we all bear responsibility." Next, please. I want to mention 3 women who have been my guide in my learning process and composing. In my learning process about listening, sorry. Paulina Oliveros, electronic music pioneer, composer, performer, and teacher. She dedicated her life to a practice known as deep listening. She makes a difference between hear and listen. Hear and listening. Here is an event, listening is an action, it is something that we do consciously. I quote her, "Each act of abandon listening is an acceptance that one will be moved outside of one's control. Each act of listening could be profoundly ethical in nature." For me, being moved is the initial stage of conscious listening. Deep listening invokes a profound ethical dimension of human experience because it has the potential of human intelligence, compassion, and understanding to transcend the boundaries of our anthropocentric perspective and to be able to be in harmony with a fuller dimension of life on the planet. To be able to listen to the more than human and all the life that the natural sound environment can house. I ask myself, are we being ethical in our listening to nature? Next, please. Sorry. Thank you. So, Anea Lockwood is a New Zealand-born American composer. I deeply respect her work with the sound of nature. In 2021, after the pandemic or during the pandemic times, she wrote about the difference between listen to and listen with. I quote her, "It's my sense that if I am standing here, I'm just one of many organisms that are listening with one another within this environment. We are all listening together. I think of sound as being an energy channel from one phenomenon to another, a sensory channel of connection that is very strong and shows me how deeply we are connected, how deeply connected we are with everything else that's around us." Another a very interesting perspective, ecocentric perspective, again, the anthropocentric perspective that we are used to. Next, please. Hildegard Westerkamp is a composer, radio artist, and sound ecologist known for her work in soundscape and attentive listening. Through her, I have come to understand the importance of paying attention to our sonic surroundings and their impact on our perception of space and connection to the environment. The active and participatory listening encourage a deeper and more conscious engagement with the sounds around us. I am convinced, like her, that listening affirms change within us and provide us with an awareness that make us feel like participants in the soundscape rather than a stranger. Who are we in this world, and to which voices do we pay attention? Why did we need a pandemic to finally notice the sounds of nature in new and significant ways? Next, please. There is some data presented in there is some data presented here that may not be essential to read. However, it is worth noting that Colombia is the second most biodiverse country in the world, and it is home to the largest tropical forest on Earth, which unfortunately is experiencing deforestation, much like other regions. As a Colombian, I strongly believe that we have a tremendous responsibility in safeguarding our ecosystem. Our commitment to peace, established 6 years ago in La Habana, also entails embracing the diversity of knowledge, particularly the wisdom of our indigenous people. For indigenous community, ritual, ecology, and cosmology form an interconnected whole. In many parts of the world, the Amazon jungle with its fish, birds, and other animals embodies what is considered nature, a distant and separate entity. However, our indigenous communities understand like we are deeply linked to Mother Earth, and it's our duty to protect and nurture all forms of life, making Earth a sanctuary for life. Next, please. In 2019, the Amazon lost more than 1.7 million hectares of primary forest. Backward, please. 137 species of plants, animals, and insects become extinct every day. Next, please. 1,203 species are threatened in Colombia, according to the IUCN Red List. Next, please. Bernie Krause is an American musician and soundscape ecologist. He has been recording wildlife sounds for nearly 50 years. He can share how wildlife sounds have changed over the course of climate change. Can we watch the video, just please? Thank you. No comments. It's so sad to see this video, and carefully listening gives us a valuable tools to evaluate the health of an ecosystem across the entire spectrum of life. Next, please, Josh, and the last one. Josh? Again, the last one. Yeah. You lost the last one, Joss? Is possible to close with the last slide? Or should I share?
Uri namake uija uvaina pa quiri vache tuere ka tuere duere ka duere uri namake urija uvaina pa quiri vache tuere ka duere ka hu chi hu.
And finally, I want to invite you, when possible, to take a walk through nature, thinking about this short meditation. Take a walk in the nature, walk silently that our bottoms of your feet become ears. What do you listen to? What is speaking to you? What do you discover? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deanna. The work that you and your organization is doing really highlights the principles of nature for all. Taking moving the artistic community, joining it with the scientific community to be able to connect with a much broader audience and try to influence decision making. As a biologist or a former biologist, I found your second last slide of the loss of the sound of the birds to be quite striking. It is so impactful in the sense that much more than a graph or a set of data can demonstrate. So thank you very much, Deanna, and I'm sure the audience will have lots of comments and questions for you as well. So thanks for getting us off to a great start. And right now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Lisa Gill. Lisa is a biologist and science communicator at the Bavarian Society for the Protection of Birds and Nature. With a background in behavioral ecology, interest in arts and design, and a strong passion for nature. As a scientist, she's interested in animal communication and the diverse disruptions it faces through human influences. After some years in basic research, studying the vocal behavior of group living songbirds, Dr. Gill joined the Dawn Chorus Project in 2020, bringing together academic science, citizen science, and arts to explore new ways for acoustic biodiversity monitoring, as well as for education, outreach, and to build awareness for nature. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, nice to be here. I'll start my presentation now, if I can find it. Yeah, this was a short little welcome to the Dawn Chorus project that I would like to talk to you about. And that project too started in 2020. You remember, probably all of you remember, that was really a very strange moment in time when somehow all human activities froze. We were not allowed to travel. We were staying at home. Everything was suddenly very quiet. there were wildlife coming back into cities, at least that's what people have been telling us. And somehow it sounded as though nature was much, much louder than before. And that was the perfect moment for Biotopia, the new Natural History Museum in Bavaria, and the Arts and Nature Foundation to kick off the Dawn Chorus project in 2020, a citizen science and arts project. With the motto, "Stop and Listen," we want to invite people to experience bird songs, to record them and to share them with the world, to make nature's voice heard. Today, the project is run by Biotopia and the Bavarian Society for the Protection of Birds and Nature, which is where I'm based at the moment. And from a scientific perspective, I'll just briefly explain what the Dawn Chorus is. The Dawn Chorus is a natural phenomenon in which many, many birds sing their fullest song even before sunrise. So this is actually a very good time window to detect species acoustically. And this type of monitoring acoustic sounds to detect species. And with this, we want to document where species are and how their abundance will, or their presence and absence will change over time. So the idea behind this project was to combine this really inspiring nature phenomenon, the Dawn Chorus, with science and arts, and to create sort of interconnections between these three different bases to create awareness to nature and to biodiversity, also to biodiversity loss, but also to the fact, as Diana told us before, we are part of nature too. So we want to create an awareness, a connection to nature. And for some people, this works better through scientific data, and for other people, this works better through, let's say, a more creative approach or a more emotional approach. And by joining forces, we wanted to create awareness to nature and, in the end, to generate change in society. And this project has been running since 2020, and it's growing steadily with recordings from all over the world. We're actually in the current main collection period, which is always from May 1st to 31st. So this is the little message here. If you're interested to join us, we're really, really happy to get more recordings from all over the world to fill some blank spots here on our sound map. But the nice thing is that, especially in 2020 and 21, people were not able to travel the world. So they had to basically stay and stop and listen to what the sounds in front of their doorstep had to offer. And it's more than people think. So now we have this map, and people can click through recordings from all over the world and travel the world through sound. And I brought you a couple of examples, which I'll show you later. First of all, I'll highlight the Dawn Chorus app, which we developed in 2021 with lots of wonderful partners. The main reason was that we wanted to standardize the recordings for science. So we have this app with which you can quite easily make scientifically standardized recordings. You just have to tap to record. The app will automatically show you your location, and you can check whether that's correct. It will also register GPS, so GPS and time and date. It will also tell you what the best timing would be during the next couple of days to make your Dawn Chorus recording. So we always tell people to go out about 1 hour before dawn until about 1 hour after sunrise. This is usually when most birds are most active. And we have a little stats section where you can check out how your performance is compared to everyone else, whether you made recordings more from the city or the countryside, so those kind of things. Then you can also explore your surroundings. So maybe my neighbor made a nice recording. Does that sound like mine? Maybe you can travel the world through sound. As I said before, you can also like recordings, or you can disagree with species that other people had mentioned they'd heard. So maybe you don't believe this was a robin, but rather a blackbird, and you can type that in. But the nice thing is really that you can add a more creative touch to your scientific recording, and that's either through comments. So you can, for example, write a little poem, but you can also turn your own sound recording into a piece of digital art. So in 2021, digital artists Marcel Kanapke and Mika Johnson designed the sonic feather module for the app. And this allows you to play around basically with the sound to have a more creative approach to the sounds that you just recorded. So depending on the loudness of your recording, you will get different organic forms appearing on your screen when you touch it, and you can create your own very individual experience here and turn it into art. And as I said, it's a quite international project so far, but we still have some blank spots. So if you are from any of those countries, we're very, very happy to fill the blank spots. And I'll just show you how you can explore biodiversity through your ears. So we'll start in Germany, in Munich, which is more or less where the project was born. You can hear some very common birds. And as the person who recorded this called this botanical gardens on a rainy day. So if you listen closely, you can hear the rain. You can also hear some geese in the background that are flying to the pond very close by. And then we'll move a bit further, and I'll just let you read, because this comment that our citizen scientists or citizen artists, whatever you want to call them, wrote us is just very beautiful, especially in companionship with the sound that he or she sent us. Beautiful sound. I love this bird. The next one is from Japan, and that one shows you that it's not just birds that make a concert, but also other species can produce choruses. Obviously, we've got lots of insects singing here as well. And there's another example from Germany, the Murnauer Moors. It is one of the largest contiguous near natural moorland regions in Central Europe. But even though we have this beautiful skylark singing, you can still hear human noise. So you think you're in the middle of nowhere, but even there you can hear human noise. And this brings me to the next topic of the Dawn Chorus project is we want to make people aware of those kind of things that we do to nature too. So we ask people where they made their recordings. Of course, we can check it out later on the map, whether that's actually true or not, whether it's what the official habitats are, but we want to make people aware of where they are. So what does it sound like if I'm in let's say in the city, or when I'm going out to the field and doing a sort of listening or recording session there? Just how do the sounds of my surroundings sound? Most of the recordings come from city habitats, so what we call city and suburban here. But lots of recordings also come from countrysides. And especially in 2020, when the lockdown measures were very strict, we had around 70% or so recordings from the city and only 30% or so from countryside. So in 2021, we launched the City versus Countryside Challenge. And this was just one day where we asked people to go out and make as many recordings as they like and to see who would win, city or countryside. And in 2021, on average, most recordings came from the city and few from countryside. And on this day of the challenge, this pattern was reversed. So the countryside caught up and beat the city at providing most recordings. And I think this is really interesting because it shows you that you can actually make people go outside and listen to sounds if they have a little challenge, if there's something that they really want to do. Another thing we ask people to think about is human noise that they heard during the recording. So we asked them, did you hear any human-made noise? And those people who said yes, experienced road traffic, most of them. And since 2020, you can see that it kind of increased slightly, but it was always much stronger than any other sounds of humans. But what really increased was the air traffic. So that more than doubled since 2020. And also human noises, I mean, made by humans themselves, increased quite a lot since the pandemic, which means obviously if you go out at 4:30 in the morning, you might not just experience birds singing, but maybe also one or two humans coming back from the pub. Then we also ask people to pay attention to the sounds of their surroundings at the same location and the same time, just once on a Sunday or on a Monday. And you would hear quite strongly the difference with headphones. I'm not sure if everyone can hear it, but I'll just give it a shot. So there's lots of car traffic going on here, and at the same location and same time of day, I think it was 5:30 or so, it sounded quite different. So now both are running at the same time. That's not ideal. So, okay, there we are. So this was the Sunday one where you only have a plane flying by, but there's actually no car traffic going on. And this is something we want to make people aware of. What does your window, what does your favorite place sound like? And are you part of your own soundscape? We humans are part of nature too. We often kind of separate ourselves from this, but we contribute to these soundscapes probably even more than birds do in some cases. So yeah, we sometimes get complaints by people that the Dawn Chorus project has this awful noise in the background, but that's reality. And we want to reflect reality. We don't just document the sounds of the birds themselves and monitor species, but we also want to document what the sounds of this habitat were like. And very last but not least, of course, we want to automatically detect what kind of bird species we're singing. But at the moment, the algorithms that exist are not very good for these dawn choruses where all the species are singing at the same time. As you can see here, this is really quite difficult to tease apart. So at the moment, we're still looking for people who are very good at identifying bird species, let's say from Germany and surrounding areas, countries, so sort of Western and Central Europe. And if you're interested or know anyone who might be interested in helping us here, you can send us an email to vogelstimme@lbv.de. And with that, I'd just like to invite you, wherever you are, you can still join us. Our period of data collection is still open until May 31st, and we welcome recordings from anywhere on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Very, very inspiring project. And it's amazing how just in a few short years, you managed to fill up most of that map of the world. And I really encourage our audience, if you know you have a colleague who lives in those blank areas, please join the Dawn Chorus, download the app, and make your contribution. So thank you very much, Lisa. That was fantastic. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So, but by all means, if you do have questions that you want to ask, put them into our chat box, and then we'll accumulate them and have a discussion with the panel at the end of the presentations. So I'd like to, it's my pleasure to introduce our third speaker, Dr. Manjari Jain. Manjari is an associate professor of biology at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Mohari, where she studies and teaches ecology, evolution, and animal behavior. Most of her research is focused on acoustic communication in animals, and she uses sound as a means to understand patterns in nature. She has worked on a range of models, systems, including insects, bats, primates, and birds, to understand how animals use sound to interact with each other. For this, she has conducted fieldwork in the rainforests of southern India, the foothills of the Himalayas, and in urban gardens, crowded cities. She's passionate about discussing her work with the public and is an advocate for inclusiveness in science. So it's my pleasure to ask Dr. Manjari Jain to give us her presentation. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everybody for joining in. So I'll try to share my presentation. Can you see the slide? Okay. So I have been working for a while now on animal sounds, how animals use sound to interact with each other. And I thought I'll use this platform to reach out to all of you to tell you a little bit about the stories that I have gathered over these years, but also about my views of how we can use sound for connecting with nature. The three major aspects that we use sound for is to understand the evolution of acoustic signals, the ecology of the animals that use acoustic signals to interact with each other, as well as the behavioral underpinning of these interactions with sound. And as you can see, for all three aspects, we use bioacoustics, or the study of sound, as a central tool, if you like, to address these questions in ecology, evolution, and behavior. And we have worked on a very large variety of model systems, from insects to mammals, nocturnal, diurnal animals. The only aspect I have not yet explored is marine and, well, other aquatic animals, maybe someday. So it's a very rich, and all of this was done in India. And as you know, that India is a very biodiverse country. There are different kinds of habitats where there are several different kinds of species which are existing, and these habitats could actually be your backyards. So in this image, I'm showing you Gaurav, a PhD student of mine, making some recordings from the campus on the left corner, where he's using this microphone to make recordings. And then a few kilometers away, there is this very beautiful natural forest. It's a deciduous forest. Then a couple of 100 kilometers further from our institute is a beautiful grassland. So it's an extremely rich country with respect to the kinds of habitats that there are, and of course the kinds of animals and plants that there are in this. So what do? We basically make recordings of the ambient noise, what we say, either using directed microphones, or we can have these recorders which are planted on the right-hand side corner, bottom corner. I'm showing you one such device. It's an audio moth, which can be planted into the habitat, and it just records all the sounds, and you can basically program it to record as you would like the recordings to be. So it can either be recordings of individuals or particular species, or it could be the sounds of the habitat, which will include everything, not just the animals, but also the habitat generated sound. So I just want to show how we actually study sound, especially for people who might not be doing it on a daily basis. So just this is what is called a spectrogram. It is just how we can see sounds. And we use a spectrogram also to measure sounds. I just want you to listen to this. I'll play this again and I will show you what are the different kinds of sounds that there are in this few seconds of recording. That's a quail. You have a crow, the house crow at the background. You have crickets and you have the brown-headed barbet. So all of this is there in these few seconds of recording, which was just taken in the backyard, just to give you an idea of, how rich the soundscape can be if we listen. So either human observers can be passively listening to the sounds, so which is you go into the habitat and you simply observe acoustically what all can you hear. And so with in that kind of paradigm, basically there are various kinds of animals that are producing sound. You record the sounds, then we plot these spectrograms, which I just showed you, that graph, and we visually and orally analyze the sound. We also analyze a lot of acoustic parameters to characterize the sound. We label them, so tag them with labels, and then we run our analysis to ask all kinds of questions, including phenology of animals. What are the seasonal patterns or activity patterns of these species? When are the species arriving to a habitat? When do they leave from a habitat? So you can study migration using sound. Dawn chorus, like Lisa told, when are at what time of the day, of course, the species is most active. It could be during the dawn, but there may be some species who are not most active at the dawn. So these kinds of questions, and of course, biodiversity monitoring, assessment, prioritizing, which area has more species. And in a country like India, you really have to prioritize. We have limited funds, so we have to decide which part of this habitat or which geographical area should be saved. Where do we put in the money, and how species are distributed? But these are all done at a small scale because there's a human observer involved, and time and effort intensive data is also limited by the scale at which we can do it. So there, machine learning has now kind of is bringing a new dimension to our science, where we can do large scale monitoring. We ask similar questions, but at a bigger scale. We can even ask different kinds of questions, such as threat detection, how noisy are the habitats which are close to the city, identifying and rediscovering species that are lost, landscape level biodiversity monitoring, all of these, in which sounds are recorded, and then there are machine learning algorithms that basically process the sound and extract some features. So a student of mine, Gaurav, is working on one such aspect. So it gives you a rich amount of information about what exists in our surroundings. But again, sound can also be used to study behavior and the evolution of signal design. If you think of the species signal, it has a particular shape and structure, acoustically speaking. So we ask, what are the drivers of this signal design? We ask whether, say, for instance, the animal vocalizations are simply arousal state or physiological state, or is there more to it? Is there some kind of syntax? And we can ask other kinds of questions, whether these sounds of the same species vary from geographical location, one geographical location to the other. Does the function change? Do the interactions change? All of this can be done using sound. And we are dipping our toes in each of these things. We have been working on using sound to understand these questions a little bit for the last several years. So I want to give you now just a trailer of the kinds of work in the different model systems that we have done. And Klaus is here in the meeting, I saw, and I just wanted to acknowledge that, Klaus, your work has been very inspiring for me. So I started looking at the calls of crickets and katydids of a rainforest. These are some of the crickets and katydids of Western Ghats, where I studied these animals. Very diverse kind of sounds. You can see the sounds look very different, and they are also of different frequency ranges. Now, the kinds of question that we wanted to ask was based on, so first of all, to tell you, these crickets and katydids, these are nocturnal insects. And here the males produce sound, the females are silent. And only males have these sound producing structures, which is present on their wings. So they rub their wings to produce sound. And the female wings, you can see, lack these structures. So first, what the males do is to raise their forewings, and they rub their forewings against each other. And Diana, I think it might interest you. The way they produce sound is by rubbing their forewings against each other. One edge of the wing, which is called the plectrum, rubs against a row of teeth, which is like strumming the guitar, more or less, and that produces sound. So this work was done in the Western Ghats, biodiversity hotspot in southern India. And these are the last remaining tracts of virgin rainforest in the Western Ghats. This is in Kudremukh. And if you see the forest inside, it is very, very heterogeneous. The architecture of the forest itself is very different. Of course, there are a lot of plants, the plant species diversity is very high, but the structure is also very different. So we wanted to get the sound from the ground to the canopy. And of course, this was not easy. We do not have canopy walkways. We do not have canopy towers. So how do I get the sounds? And back in the day, we did not have audio moth. So I just did the old school way of canopy climbing, collected the recordings, and did transmission experiments in the recording with the help of some colleagues. And this is what we know. We know that these crickets and katydids, they select for specific kind of microhabitats. So they care for specific kind of microhabitat, not just the plant species, but there are some crickets which will only call from a dead, decaying log. So that is the value of that microhabitat for this animal. You remove dead and decaying log from this ecosystem, one species will just disappear. Similarly, there are some that only call from the canopy. So we did all of this. We also asked, how are they all calling together when they are all calling at the same time? How do they even hear each other? Because it's a noisy cocktail of sound. Long story cut short, did some modeling and seeing how the sound transmits in the forest. We figured out that more or less it's like the radio, where the crickets are singing at different different frequency bands, and you tune into one frequency band and you don't hear anything else. So this is one very important mechanism of reducing what we call masking. We also use sounds to develop the first echolocation called Library of Bats from southern India. And now I'm using sound to add to our data from light traps, to use sound to find moths in the Himalayas. Of course, we study birds in urban gardens. These are again spectrograms of different bird species. But one bird which we are in particular very interested in is the jungle babbler. There are several species of babblers in India, and we are interested in social babblers. It's very commonly found in urban gardens. It is found near human habitats. And we wanted to understand the diversity of sounds that it produces. Does it have some kind of grammar, if you like, syntax? What is the meaning of its sound, so on and so forth. So we have been banding these birds for now several years, following the group movement. In the habitat, we know exactly where each of these groups are operating. So we know a lot of information about these birds. But using the sound and observing the behavior, we know much more than just the ecology of the animal. We know exactly what these sounds mean. We know that the different sounds of the jungle babbler mean different things. And in so, the jungle babblers do not babble. We also now know that these calls are actually made up of different kinds of notes in some cases, and these notes are combining to form these meaningful calls. So it could be an analogy of, how letters combine to form words, but we need to do a little more rigorous test to actually make that statement, but it is like a proto-language, if you like. So the lessons from the jungle babbler is that, understanding behavior can help us make sense of animal sounds. We know that jungle babblers do not babble. So there is semantics, there is meaning in their calls, and it is not just arousal state. And we also now understand, and we understand this from the work of in primates, but not so much work has been done on birds, despite them being so vocal. That vocal complexity, of course, is not unique to humans. It is some of the birds, they do seem to have what we call as a proto-language, a rudimentary form of language. And remember, these birds are not found inside the jungles. They are called jungle babblers. It's a misnomer. They don't babble. They're not found in jungles. They are found near human habitats. And so urban biodiversity also needs protection. We also discovered a new species of cricket from an urban landscape, not inside the forest. It was in a pumpkin patch in Kerala, using sound. So last, what I would want to just emphasize on is biodiversity. A large part of it is in the tropics, and the tropics have developing nations. We are worrying about climate change, biodiversity crisis, but we must remember that this brings into picture developing nations, and sustainable development has to go hand in hand with biodiversity conservation. We cannot alienate communities that live around protected areas, because that is counterproductive. Many people have said this, but I will re-emphasize this, that this needs to be taken into account. We need to worry about the tropics. We need to worry about developing nations. We need to worry about how livelihoods can be lost, as we are also worrying about biodiversity. But we should remember, biodiversity does not know boundaries. We have to look beyond protected areas also. Last but not the least, nature has a song, and we need to learn how to listen. So with that, thank you very much. And this is my group at ISA Mohali.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It's very obvious that you're extremely passionate about your work, and it really came through in the presentation. So thank you. And I'm really happy to see some of your work is related to the urban environment, connecting your studies with the people who are impacted by the urban environment, and how nature can help support them. So thank you very much for your presentation. Now we're at the next stage of our webinar, and this is where the audience can ask all of us the questions that you may have. We've had three very inspiring presentations from very different parts of the world. Great messages and contributions to the Nature for All movement, and I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to bring these three excellent speakers together in one place. I will start off by giving clapping hands for all the presenters today. So now it's over to you, and I know we have some questions already in the chat, but please use your raise your hands if you have questions that you want to ask any of the panelists personally. So I'm just scanning the chat line for some of the questions that are already there.
Mike, this is Jose here. I think one question for Deanna and Lisa, maybe to start us off, would be one of the questions from the chat was, how do we make sure if these recordings are now online, how do we make sure that they stay there? Like, how do we that they don't disappear when somebody moves on, or how do we maintain that?
Mm-hmm. Who would like to start?
Well, I can start with the Dawn Chorus if you like. So at the moment we have this database for the Dawn Chorus recordings that were made within the framework of the project. And I read a message from Klaus as well. We did have some people who wanted to send us more recordings, and this would be fantastic. Just at the moment, we cannot guarantee to kind of safeguard those types of very extensive recordings. As you know, sound recordings get very quick, very, yeah, huge, basically. So that, again, that means lots of storage and also energy to store the files. So at the moment, we can guarantee the short recordings that we ask people to make with the app, but we have to think about a concept to work with longer files, sort of the treasures that other scientists and non-scientists have. Yeah, so at the moment, I don't have a simple answer for that one, unfortunately.
Thanks, Lisa. For our case, we are aware about our responsibility to keep those sounds. So at the moment we have our platform, but we are in conversation with Martin Stewart, for example. I don't know if you know him. The Listening Planet is recommended. He's in Facebook, internet, and Instagram, and he has one of the most biggest collection library of sound. So we are making like an agreement with him because we are aware of this responsibility. We need this memory is very important to keep. Yes, the sounds are very important to keep the memory of the ecosystem. So we are working on it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lisa and Deanna, for that. Maybe I'll start off with a question for all three panelists. As I mentioned earlier, fantastic presentations. We recognize the biodiversity and climate crisis that we are currently in, and obviously your work will help contribute to some of the solutions down the road. But it's obvious, we also know that we need to scale up our work considerably. Maybe just a comment from each one of you, given the success you have had so far, what is the next step in terms of further engagement, broadening your audience, and turning up the awareness of the great work that you're doing? So anyone want to start?
I can start. In our case, from VozTerra, we think that, okay, we will continue to do this like project from listening to the nature, because we are convinced that listening to the nature, you can create awareness. But we want really to help, or to our next step is to convert the ecosystem in kind of composers, like kind of, yes, they produce sound music, and we want to make collaborations with artists. So it's our next step, because we think that if we go in many paths, in many strategies, we can do something. And with music and sound, collaboration with the big artists, sound artists, musician, and the ecosystem will on the other part, will give us, how you say, money to reinvest in the ecosystem. So this is one of our strategic to continue to the next step.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Mike, I just wanted to say that we have one Android app that we developed, which was to help beginners to identify birds around them. And there are so many apps which we realize that they're helping seasoned birders, but some of us realize that the way towards conservation and sustainable conservation would be to actually get the really young ones, possibly even school children, to already that this is an Ashiprinia, and that is a black-headed munia. So what we thought was we'll have this app, and we developed it only for Android users, not for Apple. So now we wanted to have this app where the students, school children, anyone can sort of identify birds in the surrounding. We have sounds for them to help them identify. The problem always is, as I said, in developing nations, at some point you will hit a sort of a dead end where you don't have the resources. We don't have the money to put these recordings in the cloud. There's only as much tape that we can have. So we are doing this in the small scale, but I really feel that the future of conservation really lies in the hands of school children and maybe college going people, that age group, because I think we are sort of, I don't think there's too much more that we can contribute, I feel. And we really have to reach out to that age group to be able to make an impact. So that is what I really strongly feel. And to sort of think about how can we work with developing nations to, if we really worry about the climate crisis, if we really worry about the biodiversity crisis, we really need to think about developing nations. How can we help there?
Thank you,
Yeah,
very important. Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. For the Dawn Chorus, I think this is a very nice connection too. So we started getting schools involved last year. We developed a small unit for a school class for teaching all around birds and biodiversity and bird song. And we realized that there's much more potential there. So because these sounds of nature touch on so many different aspects, also of topics that you have to teach your children at school, it's actually the perfect thing to start with. Basically, you can go into so many different directions. Of course, there's biology. You can also learn about artificial intelligence. You can also use it for music, for art. You can use it for exploring geography. You can think about, especially in Germany, there are lots of people who used to live in different countries when they were small, and maybe they remember the sounds of what it sounded like back then when they were at home there. What's their home now? What does it sound like? So there are so many different topics that you can talk to children to. And I think this emotional connection to nature is really important to get that across at a very, very young age, because that's when connections form and when they will stick sort of throughout the rest of their life. So I totally agree with Manjari that yes, this is probably the age when we can still get people involved. And the second step also is to get people to recognize the species, because I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, but in Germany, it seems knowing species is something for old people. So not just the species are dying out, but also the species knowledge is dying out somehow. So we really have to invest in getting people to know the species that are around them. So the nice thing about the Dawn Chorus project is you can join in, even if you don't know a single bird, you can still make a contribution. But the next step will definitely be to teach people what these species are that they just heard.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm glad this webinar is being recorded, because there are many key messages coming from all three of you to that question. Now let's go to the audience. I know Justin has been patiently waiting to ask his question, so over to you, Justin.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for the floor. I thank you for the presentation. I'm Justin from Biodiversity, Environment and Sustainable Development NGO from Cameroon. We also use my question is related to the passive acoustic monitoring method. We also use this method in one complex in our country to monitor the lion population. So my question is, I would like to know if we leave the match call maybe in the protected areas for a long time, and we come to bring it, and we have the data, the spectrograms. Sometimes if the match call is close to a tree, and this tree is break down and produce a sound. And we have also the sound of a gunshot. The spectrogram can be the same thing. So if you have a big database, it's so difficult to listen each sound to analyze this data. So I would like to know, if you observe the spectrogram like that, how can we make the difference between a gunshot and a tree which is breakdown? Thank you.
Mike, shall I take this? Yeah, so this definitely is, so first thing is that for very large data sets, temporal or spectral pattern matching is not really the way to go. So you cannot really just match the sounds and say that this is what this is. It's very difficult to do this. And typically what people do, if you want just say, for instance, a single species you are trying to get at, then you train your data set with that species sounds, and you tell that, well, this is what the lion sound sounds like, and you provide this annotated data to the machine learning algorithm, and then it will devise a way to then sort of identify this. But there are going to be false positives, and that is definitely a problem. It depends upon the robustness of the algorithm that you have devised. So sometimes there are common algorithms which can be, so Sarab Sethi is someone who has been working on this, Dan Stowell, there are several people who are working on this. Lisa has also done for individual identification in birds. So but I think it will work best if the algorithm is sort of developed specifically for your species. That's how it works the best. As for gunshots and that being confused with, say, a tree breaking down or something, again, this is something which I think depends upon the training data set. If you provide reliable, very varied training data set to the machine learning algorithm, your results are likely to be better. So it will take a lot of effort to first annotate and tell that, okay, this is a gunshot and this is a tree falling down. And this itself is a very long drawn process, but it can be done.
Okay, thank you. Another question, please. If I suppose that we have two species which produce the sound in the same frequency, I think I would like to know if it's possible that the spectrogram will be the overlap. And if we have something like that, how can we make the difference between the two species?
Who would
Lisa,
like to take that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Again, it depends on how much data you have and how diverse your training data set is. So these overlapping sounds are, mean. We have the same problem. I don't have a simple answer for you. I'm sorry, but we're also trying to work on it with experts in the field. So I would strongly advise you to kind of get a hold of one of those, and maybe they can help you.
Okay.
Okay, can I just pitch in here? Just one possibility, at least in crickets, it works. I don't know how it will work for the species that you are looking at. They may be very similar in the spectral domain, but temporally they may be different. So in the time domain, the structure of the sound may be very different. So for example, one species can be, and the other one may be like, so it's spectrally still the same, but in the time domain, they're different. So you're looking in the wrong place. Then you should not look at the frequency, but look at the time domain features.
Okay, because until now we encounter some problem with data analysis when we coming from the field. It's for that I am asking this question. I have another question, but I think if I can have your address, maybe I will email you after.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah.
The next hand I see is from Jai Sharma. Over to you.
Good evening to all. And thanks for the wonderful presentation. And thanks for giving the opportunity to ask the questions. And I'm a National Geographic Nature and Wildlife educator and part of IUCN CEC and Nature for All. And I very much like the approach of involving young children from schools. And that's what I do. I'm collaborating with almost 20 schools in Bangalore and over 100 schools in India, and working with them on various projects on biodiversity mapping or say greening the school grounds. And this is one area which I was looking for, that yes, we don't have the, as you suggested, we don't have the cloud capacities or the recording mediums, because children are not permitted to carry their mobiles while sound recording. So we have started something like this in schools. And during lockdown, some of the recordings were wonderful, and children had also done the sound mapping and the recognition of the bird calls, which gave them direct understanding and say the passion increase. And we were very proud. I'm very proud to say and very fortunate that National Geographic picked up that sound recording calls as a chapter, and they've started as a lesson plan, and which we are now propagating. So I would like to have suggestions or say improvements, like what kind of economical equipment we can use. There are students who want to go for say next level of sound recordings. One of my students is already a PhD student in ornithology in Holland, and he's studying certain sound recordings on the warblers and the birds of Europe. So likewise, there are students who want to take up as a next level, maybe as a career option, or maybe as a hobbyist, or maybe as a passion which is inclining or pushing them to conservation. So how can we have a separate page? Because all these organizations, what I see, are from different countries, different locations and all. Is there a common way, or on say for India, for example, Manjari ma'am can help us with defining or dedicating a page where schools can upload, because that becomes a competition also. It's not just how green my school is, how many birds there are, how much biodiversity I hold, how much sound are we listening, natural sounds, which indirectly is helping us. As we all know, nature helps in minimizing stress, and really releasing us enjoyment. Everything is there in nature. So how much can we record and then we can document, which again becomes phenological studies, which we are trying to do. And we can have some scientific modules in that at school level from class 4 onwards to the senior levels, grade 12. And when they graduate and we have data for say 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, and so on, the next generation which goes to the next class can just take in. Is there a medium where any of these organizations are working that kind of platform or a page for schools?
I would like to answer your first question, because I am a professional recordist, but I really like to work, for example, with the mobiles, with telephones, because for me, it depends what are you looking for. If I am composing with a very quality sounds, it's a different way. But for me, for the school, the most important for me is the process to listening. And if they don't have very nice equipment and expensive equipment, I always use mobiles, telephones, because the most important is listening. Then there is equipment like like Zoom H4, Zoom H6 that are not expensive. And my partner in VozTerra just built a binaural microphone by himself. So it's very interesting to try to try this kind of equipment that we can build ourselves. But I repeat, the most important for me is the process to listening. I don't care. The project that we did during pandemic, the sounds of your windows, it was we call people to record the sounds of their windows without professional equipment. And sometimes when I compose, for example, I was composing a piece from Amazon and Antarctic, and I didn't have the sounds. I use MP3 I don't care. They were not very quality sounds, but if you listen to my piece, you will never say, "Oh my God, this is," because the important is the material. But for me, like when I compose, it's the material, and for the student, is the process to listening. Maybe you can answer the next question.
Thanks a lot. I think, yeah. And second thing is, we are also using those sounds, like when we are teaching children about making documentaries or documenting their work, to use those small videos in the backyard or in the school. So if you permit, if we have time, I'd just like to show, or maybe I'll put a link there so everybody can. So when I visited certain national parks with the children and during nature camps and all, so we record sounds and then we use them. I said, don't use any artificial film song or any composer song. Use natural calls and sounds in the background wherever that scenes are there. So that also helps people to identify and also relate better. Yes, nature sounds are always better than any artificial music.
Great.
And I'll put a link of that.
Thank you so much for your questions. I noticed there's one on the chat. Question from Rose. Would you like to ask that question yourself, Rose?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I have my headphones don't actually have a working microphone, so yeah, no, thank you for highlighting that, and thank you, Maria, for already answering that question in part. But so I definitely see the my angle on soundscapes research is trying to understand how to improve or understand human connection to nature, similar to what Jai Sharma you were talking about as well, in terms of understanding basic all of the ways that we are connected to nature and thrive via it, right? So, and I also understand that acoustics research is kind of expensive, right? So it's in a way can be dominated by a Western science and like reductionist approach to understanding the weaving and intersections of like acoustics in local environments. And so I find it really important to acknowledge or understand how, yeah, our local communities that are involved, say, in our acoustics research, are they reporting that they feel more empowered, that they feel that they have a voice, that it is improving conservation policy and making it more just, fair, and recognizant of multiple knowledges? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose. I'm just cognizant of the time. It's amazing how 90 minutes can go by so fast when you're having great presentations and conversations. I hope everyone in the audience were inspired by the presentations, as was I. And based on the questions, I think we already have some good examples of where people would like to join up with, find out more information about your initiatives and also join up with your initiatives, or even adopt your initiatives to their own settings. So this is just the start of the conversation. Let's continue to stay connected. If you're not part of the IUCN Commission on Communications and Education, please join that group, or the World Commission on Protected Areas, and where we can continue these dialogues. And perhaps even more importantly, if you do have examples that you can contribute, go to the Nature for All website and broadcast to the world what you are doing, and inspire others. I think we've heard from all the speakers their wonderful work, but also we heard from many that we need to scale up our work in order to meet these crisis of biodiversity loss and climate change. So thank you so much. I'd like to thank the three speakers, Diana, Lisa, and Manjeri. Excellent presentations, and I hope that the dialogue continues. So thank you for your participation. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.